I think when you are in a startup or a growth spurt as a company, you're limited in the resources and talents you have. And I think it's really important to understand, look, and it's same for any leader in or individual in their career, is understanding of what are our key strengths, competencies, and experiences. Maybe it's a founder, there might be two co-founders, there might be three or four people in the team or organization. Where's the gap? And often what we've noticed is the gap is often on the business and financial side.
My name is Doug Gordon, and on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Aongus Hegarty. Aongus is a renowned business leader and seasoned board member with over 35 years of global experience, most notably as President for International Markets at Dell Technologies, where he led operations across 170 different countries. A passionate advocate for business, innovation, entrepreneurship, sustainability, leadership and gender balance, he co-chaired the Irish government's Balance for Better Business initiative for 3 years. Aongus is the founder and director of Lakeside Capital Limited and serves on the Global Advisory Council for VentureWave Capital. He is a board member of the University of Limerick Foundation and on the Special Olympics Ireland Committee and on the Munster Rugby Commercial Advisory Group. He is also an adjunct professor at the University of Limerick and has been honoured with a life fellowship by the Irish Management Institute in 2019 and recipient of the prestigious Whitaker Award from the Irish Academy of Management in 2024. Aongus continues to shape the future of business and leadership, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Aongus, welcome to the show.
Hi Doug, delighted to be here.
Well, I tell you what, I've looked at your LinkedIn, I know you pretty well, and I have to say you've done so much. It's an absolute honour to have you here. And on top of that, obviously we met back in 2020. I think you'd done an amazing speech, and I listened to it online, and I reached out to you, and you very kindly invited me into Dell, and then very kindly I actually ended up coaching some of your staff in Dell, and I have to say it's an absolute honour. And so many people that I've met at Dell always sing your praises, even people who've left Dell, so they're not just saying it because they're in Dell, even people who've left Dell, who I know one of them you actually met recently, still absolutely sings your praises. And what I'd love to know, in terms of leadership, you were there for 25 years as the president for most of the time. What do you think helped you sustain that kind of a success for such a long tenure?
Well, thank you very much indeed for your very kind words, Doug. I guess to answer your first question, many things. I guess 25 years in Dell and over 35 years kind of in my career, I learned a lot of lessons. And try to apply those learnings to improve myself as a leader. And I think some things that jump to mind are around building teams and building diverse teams. I think that's really, really important. I think we have a tendency as leaders to hire people who look kind of like ourselves and have maybe similar competencies or experiences, whereas you require really a variety of experiences, skills, backgrounds, competencies, so that team really can help you create great outcomes and great decisions. But I think the second piece that I learned as well is the need for me to, one, understand what my dominant leadership style is, which if you do a Hogan assessment, it would be colourful, and to realize that you need a variety of leadership styles to be a successful leader. And certainly with a diverse team, you need a collaborative, inclusive culture within that team, so that you're drawing out all the great ideas and inputs to make really good decisions and good outcomes. And I think they're some of the things I certainly found challenging in my career to learn and to apply, but certainly those two in particular would be, in my opinion, very, very critical. I think it's also important as a leader, I spent 25 years in Dell to be continuously learning, and certainly in the technology industry and now how it impacts all industries and companies from a technology point of view, it's rapidly changing. So you need that continuous learning, continuous innovation. Michael Dell often spoke about, taking balanced risks, failing and learning from the failures and applying them as you move forward as well too. So I think that, testing, trying out new things, new initiatives, and then learning from those, adapting on the successes, but learning from the mistakes and applying them as you go forward. So there'll be some of the things I think that have helped me to sustain my career. Along with the fact, I guess, Dell, often people would say to me, that's a long time in one company. It was actually, I would think, at least 5 different companies, given its evolution and change from, when I joined, it was a PC and notebook company, a desktop notebook company, a little bit of infrastructure on the server side. Went private, acquired EMC and VMware, combined those into Dell Technologies, went back public again after that. So lots of change in strategy and approach, and lots of excitement, and a great fun place to work for over 25 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when I came in to see you, I felt a real sense of presence, grace, and humbleness in terms of you being such an astute leader, and yet I just felt like I was the center of attention, which was lovely. And I spoke to a lot of people who have worked with you, and they said the same thing. How do you manage your time and manage to be so grounded when you've got 170 different countries to look after?
Well, look, I think, everything comes down to relationships, and from my perspective, I think great leadership is leadership styles that, as I talked earlier on, that are collaborative and inclusive. But I also think there needs to be a strong degree of humility and selflessness. I think the days are long gone of, ego-driven, centric leadership. We have some of that in politics at the moment, unfortunately, in some countries in the world, and I don't think it's a recipe for success. And certainly, building a team, attracting talent into the organization, laying out a vision and a strategy, you need to have your ears open, listening to people, building relationships, and supporting and guiding them through not just the good times, because that's easy, I think, to do from a leadership point of view, but guiding and supporting maybe through some of the more challenging elements. Staying connected to people. You mentioned over 170 countries. It's important, and I traveled extensively in my years in Dell, first when I was president of Europe, Middle East and Africa, and then in the international role. And I always use the opportunity when I'd visit a new country I hadn't been to before to go in a day early, spend time immersing myself in the culture, the history, the people, so that I had a really good perspective, and I could take that perspective and learning into my conversations with customers, with partners, and with the team as well too. And that really helped, I think, in building bridges and building relationships with people, not just those that are close to you in your operations and business, maybe out of Ireland, but also around the world as well too.
Yeah, I remember when I came in to see you, you'd just been to China, and it was 2020, just as the pandemic was starting, or COVID was just emerging. And yet you'd also been, I think, to Morocco, you'd been over to Dallas, all over the world. So, because I was checking you out before I came in, in terms of time management, how, as a leader like yourself, how do you effectively manage your time in the best possible way?
Look, I think it's really important, obviously, to, as I mentioned earlier on, have a great team, build a good team, a diverse team, make sure that you're using that breadth of knowledge and expertise and experience through a collaborative and inclusive environment to make great decisions. But then you also have to focus on yourself. For example, I traveled extensively, so I couldn't impact the quantity of time I had with friends, family, or to myself and my hobbies and things I like to do. So I really focused on the quality of that. I wouldn't say it throughout all of my career. If Martina was here, she'd certainly say that maybe in the early years I was more challenged in getting that right. But I think particularly maybe over the last 12 plus years, I was in Dell. I got it in a very good shape, I think. I took my holidays, I switched off, put on my out of office, turned off my phone, and left someone in charge and provided an emergency number if it was needed. And that allowed me to switch off to energize, gave a great signal to the team that I trusted them and to the individual I asked to look after things. And it meant I came back energized and focused. Similarly, I used to work very early in the morning because I'd be in contact with China or Australia or Asia, maybe 6:30. So I would avoid working at night and in the evenings. And I'd make sure the US organization and the corporate team, put calls in the afternoon when they were up and I was up rather than at nighttime. So balancing it in that way, and then kind of setting a great example or a better example to the team as well. I also think you've got to work on your energy levels, exercise, nutrition, your mind. Certainly taking holidays and switching off helped a huge amount around energy and mind. I struggled with how do I fit in exercise when you're traveling all the time and people have you doing breakfast meetings and late night dinners, etc. So I used to book in the gym in my diary. I have a guy, Matt Kelly, who helps train me. And that has made a huge difference for me. And I've been doing that for the best part of 10 years. And I don't move and shift those things unless there's a really, really good reason. And it allows me to do that maybe 2 or 3 times a week, because I was great at packing the bag, putting all the gym gear into it and flying it around the world and it never coming out because I didn't have the time, or I wasn't well motivated maybe to do that. So that worked and fit really, really well for me. And then the nutrition side, I used to be very, much looking at what I ate when I was traveling, try to eat more fish, less meat, limit the amount of alcohol I would have, when I was traveling, etc. Just so you looked after the different aspects. I think that allowed me to certainly continue to deliver for the company, for my team, to perform, and to make sure I had a good balance from a life perspective.
I love that. And I know when we first met, I mentioned to you that I have a business side and a Buddhist side. And I said I didn't want to scare you at that point in time, but you actually were quite open to it. I remember when we talked about it at the time. And actually I interviewed last week, talking of energy, I interviewed Andrew Conway, the Munster winger, an Irish winger. And he told me one of the game changers for him was holistic meditation in terms of visualization and calming his central nervous system down. Is this anything kind of the thing that you would do at all as well?
No, that hasn't worked for me. I tried it for sure, but I did also take up in the last, probably last 18 months, yoga.
Okay.
Yeah, myself and Martina were down in Southeast Asia and had an opportunity over kind of 5 weeks to do yoga a couple of days a week. So I tried it before but struggled to get into it, but because I was doing it over a longer period, it actually worked really well. And I came back, and locally we have a great yoga studio, and I do that once or twice a week, and that certainly helps a lot around flexibility, kind of coupled with walking and hiking, and obviously the gym as well too. But those elements for me, I think often get overlooked. Lots of people go on leadership programs, and it's a lot about leadership and styles and models and testing of these things, etc. And there's maybe on the periphery a little bit about nutrition, exercise, mind, etc., and balance. But there's a fantastic program that Liam Sheedy runs with Cancelo and Jane Mitchell and UL and the academics there, as well as it takes place in the High Performance Centre in Munster Rugby. I was down last week speaking at it from a leadership point of view. I had done that a while back, as had other members of my team. And I took away from that those 2 elements I worked on, the gym piece and the exercise and the nutrition element. And that program is fantastic, I think, in dealing with those really important aspects that often get overlooked in leadership. There was some meditation in it, it just wasn't for me.
Fair enough. Obviously you mentioned Munster there, and I mentioned Andrew as well. Is there a lot of things that you can see that align in sport in terms of leadership that can be utilized in commercial business as well?
Yeah, I think if you look at a team, whether it's Limerick hurling GAA team, or whether it's Munster Rugby or the Ireland rugby team, I think there's 2 aspects to that. You have obviously the day-to-day management and coaching of the team and the performance and the results, but you also have to be working on, and we work with Ian Flanagan and Dave Kavanagh on the longer term strategies and plans, and I think that's really, really important. And it is the same in business, those 2 aspects. And I think Dell was very much an operational commercial environment where you could spend all your time on the day-to-day operational elements and not set aside time on the more strategic transformational elements. And certainly as a leader, I was always looking at how I was balancing my time and focus around that. In fact, I at the end brought it down to color coding my diaries. 1 color for kind of day-to-day operational meetings, engagements, activities, events, etc., and then a different color for what was more thinking time, strategic, transformational type sessions and activities or events we were doing. So for me, that helped to balance. And at a glance, where I looked at a day, a week, a month, or a quarter, I could see, do I have that 60-40, like 60% and 40%. And it varies obviously for the different roles you're doing, but having that balance, and I think in sport that's also the same. Same with the team. Clearly, you have a team, and at the moment we have two or three great players retiring from Munster Rugby. So you have your team members who are highly experienced, who bring a lot of knowledge and experience to the team. But you also, through pathway programs and the academy, have young people coming into the team, new, fresh, and it's the same. I remember Michael many years ago decided as a company that we would hire a minimum of 25% into the company of people who would come with pretty much no experience. They'd be coming from school into apprenticeship programs or into through college, or coming in through internship programs or co-op programs. And that meant that this constant feed of fresh people coming in, new ideas, young people, how they use technology is very different to maybe my generation. So all of that feeds into a really great dynamic breadth of experiences, skills, backgrounds from a team point of view. And clearly the coach and leader needs to leverage that and maximize the output.
I love that. And you mentioned a bit about balance, and slightly moving across in terms of balance. I know you've been a great advocate in terms of gender balance and working in terms of helping in that for boards over in Ireland and beyond. Just tell us, how did you get into that?
So I had a light bulb moment when back, I guess it was 2012, we had been organized as a company globally into segments. Consumer and small and medium business, public sector, large enterprise. And I had led the business in Europe for consumer and small and medium business. And I was asked to lead Europe, Middle East and Africa, bringing all of those segments together into a single organization. I remember sitting down and working through all the different roles and regions and that needed to be filled, looking at all the talent that we had in the organization, and picking the very best person for each and every one of those individual roles, and then standing back and staring at it and realizing that I had one female leader in the leadership team of about 12 people. And I was surprised by that. I couldn't understand. There was great talent of male and female in the organization. Why was I seeing so few coming through and ready to take up those types of opportunities? So that started me on a journey of understanding that, of spending time externally and internally, and understanding how we would work on that going forward. And I got involved then in Balance for Better Business and the 30% Club back in 2015, 16, I think 17, we formed the government initiative led by business. And there we were focusing in on how do we, at the time, I think the ISAC index of public companies had 16 or 17% female directors. How did we get better representation? We were a massive lagger in Europe in relation to that. And we focused on helping companies build plans, set targets, measure, report, and continue a cycle quarterly, yearly to continue to improve the diversity and mix within the organization. That initiative was just on one lens of diversity, which is gender. There's multiple lenses out there. 20% of the people in Ireland today were not born in Ireland. So cultural diversity, nationality diversity, there's lots of areas to work on. I said targets earlier on, and that's really, really important. We believe in setting targets, tracking against those targets, and continuing to make progress and looking at what actions you're doing to help drive that change, not quotas. And I think the current pushback and challenge you see out of the US in particular and elsewhere has come from the fact that, they moved more to a quota where we need to fill the next two jobs with women or Hispanic or Black or, different requirements, rather than we need to fill that role with the best person possible. But how do I create a slate of candidates and choice that is more diverse in nature? And that's where we put the focus around, is ensuring that you have that pipeline inside your company developing and your pipeline of talent you're attracting from outside that's more diverse in whichever nature and focus you're looking at. But always, always, always pick the best person for the role. 30% Club is a great initiative globally and very well run here in Ireland on that. And Balance for Better Business continues to be very focused around it from a leadership and board point of view as well.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about it myself. I actually was the PR agent and coach for the only black lady candidate for the senator role here in Dublin and Trinity. Unfortunately, she didn't get in, but maybe next time as well.
And Doug, just to double back, the reason for the focus is the business outcomes. It's the business performance. You will get better results, more success, more innovation, better performance. That's the reason. It is obviously much better to have your team representative of your marketplace, but actually it's centered in a business initiative, and that's why it's led by business. And it's very focused around how do we ensure that as Irish businesses, be it indigenous or multinational or the overall economy, how does it perform better? How is it more innovative, more successful? How does it win more market share around the world? How does it grow and continue to expand? That's the focus, not we want to have, you know, a specific quota or target that we want to achieve.
Yeah, I totally agree. I say it on stage all the time. I said, look, we all have these goggles and we see the world in different perspectives. So the more perspectives you get on the problems, the better solutions you can potentially get as well in terms of the performance. So I totally love that. On kind of a balance as well, I know obviously you were the chair of the American Chamber of Commerce for the European Union for quite some time. How do you balance almost the local focus compared to the global focus in terms of what you do both in business and outside of business as well?
I think definitely, you know, 99% of my job was business related outside of Ireland. So for a significant portion of my time, I was spending, you know, that time focused on where the biggest markets were and the biggest opportunities. But at the same time, in Dell, at that point, we had about 5,000 employees between Limerick and Cork and Dublin, with significant engagement into the community, into obviously business, economy and industry in Ireland, with both manufacturing and services and financial services and many aspects of sales and marketing that we had based out of Ireland. I would say probably in the last 6-7 years that I was in Dell, I was conscious of, you know, the more limited network I had in Ireland, that my contacts and network was far more customer and business wise in Europe and further afield. And so that's why I got involved in the government initiative, working with other business leaders in Ireland on Balance for Better Business. That's why, because I had a passion and interest for Special Olympics, I initially joined their patrons committee, and since I've joined their board. And also get involved at a European level with European leaders through the American Chamber in Brussels, as you mentioned. And then I had a passion for sport and rugby and technology in sport, and that's why I got involved in the Munster rugby element. So, you know, I realized as I was moving through my career, it was important to also build that network within Ireland, but also to pick things that were connected and relevant to Dell, both community-wise and business-wise, as I spent time on that. But it was probably about 5% of my time, because I still was very focused on growing the business internationally.
Yeah, and in Dell, you were there for 25 years. Was there any key pivotal moment in your leadership or thinking during that time period that you can really remember? And second part of the question is, what are you most proud of in terms of what you did while you're at Dell?
So I would say there's dozens of pivotal moments. I think I talked a little bit earlier around how many different companies it was, but you know, I went to college in UL in Limerick, and one of the big advantages of that, at the time it was NAHE, it was the University of Limerick, the year I graduated, was that we went out into industry and worked for a year while we were in college. So we got a great grounding in the softer skills, you know. So, you know, I would say that certainly helped me at the start of my career very much, because I was going out and interviewing for jobs, and I joined Digital Equipment in Galway in the software division, having done 2 co-op and internship program periods with them. But I had that balance of having done the academic element of business, accounting and finance, but also having honed and developed the softer skills of networking and presentations and all those other elements that you do when you work. So that was a great start. Certainly, the decision to join Dell was a great choice, and then to have been in that period over 25 years of such significant change and challenge. As a company, we were hugely challenged in 2006, 2007. Michael Kemp stepped back into being the CEO of the company, and we fundamentally changed our model. And to watch a leader and an entrepreneur like Michael, who had developed, direct only models, no inventory, not working with the channel and partners, entirely organic growth, no acquisitions, and there was one in that whole initial 15 years of the company, to then turn the strategy completely around, embrace the channel, move into doing 5-6 acquisitions per year for the next 5 years, and then having the strength and decision making to go and say, I'm going to take this company private, because I think for at least a period of time we can grow and innovate faster, and we can make decisions faster, and we did that for a number of years, and it was a very exciting time. And then to be part of the biggest acquisition and combination in the tech industry with Dell and EMC and VMware combining together into Dell Technologies, and then back as a public company as well. So lots of pivotal moments of both challenge but also opportunity to learn, and Michael and the leadership team at Dell continue to give me expanding opportunities of responsibility that were very, very exciting.
I love that. And pivoted again now out of Dell into innovation and impact investing, and obviously set up Lakeside Capital. Tell us a little about that, and what kind of businesses are you interested in helping going forward?
Yeah, Lakeside Capital is a group of 7 of us that I would say what's probably unique is all 7 of us have very different sets of experiences and skills, but very complementary when you put them together. We've members of the group that come from a very significant global roles in supply chain and manufacturing, HR, finance, CFO, go-to-market sales and business, services, tech support, business operations. So a really broad set of experiences and skills, which helps a lot then in evaluating companies to invest in, because maybe if you were more limited in the viewpoint you could look at those companies from, but because we have that breadth of background and experience, it helps a lot in doing a more holistic, I think, review of the opportunities. We've invested in 5. We're just in the middle of completing our 6th investment at the moment, yeah, it's been really good. We've probably spent significant time with about 25 or 30 different companies over the last 18 months or so that we've been focused on this. Industries have leaned into areas like energy, healthcare, also customer loyalty. We've invested in Squid. You might be familiar if you ever get a coffee around the city here. And again, in kind of the healthcare space and energy as well.
Yeah, we were using Squid this morning, which was brilliant. In terms of the kind of, what are the kind of founders or ventures that really excite you personally?
So one of those investments we have made is into a company called Hydromed. And the CEO in there is Suzanne Maloney. And Suzanne has developed products that are bandages and allow people who have painful wounds and infections to wear more comfortable bandages and plasters and clothes. And when you look at the impact and I suppose the relief that gives to people who have those ongoing infections and challenges and pain, it's wonderful to see a CEO like Suzanne who's building a business that's really helping people to be able to live their lives, to be able to go out and do all the things we all like to do day to day. So that one is really, really powerful, and there's a number of investments we made in the healthcare space that are helping to really transform outcomes for people from a medical perspective.
I obviously come from an investment background myself, and I've sat in front of a lot of pitches, I've given a lot of pitches, and I'm sure you have as well now. What would you say to any upcoming founders, entrepreneurs or leaders is key and critical for them and their pitch in terms of how they communicated across to you and other venture capital companies?
I think when you are in a startup or in a growth spurt as a company, you're limited in the resources and talents you have. And I think it's really important to understand, look, and it's same for any leader or individual in their career, is understanding of what are our key strengths, competencies, and experiences. Maybe it's a founder, there might be two co-founders, there might be 3 or 4 people in the team or organization. Where's the gap? And often what we've noticed is the gap is often on the business and financial side of things. So how do you ensure that you can cover that aspect? How can you ensure that you can, bring in someone, maybe it's a day a week or support, that will give you that financial acumen or business acumen aspect to complement maybe great design of a product or service and great knowledge on how to bring that to market, but how do you build the financial success behind it? So I think it's taking stock of what are the skills, experiences you have and backgrounds, and what are the ones that are gaps that are critical at this point and juncture to build success for the company, and then look at that and see how you apply that. I also think it's really important to, it's not just entrepreneur startup, and Michael's often spoken about this, to take risks, balanced risks, test new things, push the boundaries. And Michael often says fail and fail often. But there's a little caveat in there, which is to fail, learn from the failure and apply it. Let's not make the same mistake or the same failure twice. But if you're testing out things and they're all successful, then you're probably not pushing the boundaries of what's possible, because you learn from those failures and you apply those learnings into being even more successful. So I think that's important, taking risks and testing and trying out things. Don't bet the company on it, try it in a balanced way, I think is also really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think someone said to me at one stage, when I first started out being an entrepreneur myself, I said, geez, I had so many failures. And he said, that's brilliant. Yeah. At least you know the right direction, hopefully going forward. Yeah, exactly. So I love that. And obviously you're doing a lot of mentoring now as well with people both in university and outside of university as well. What do you see is the positives and the slight worries for the Gen Zs and the millennials going forward compared to, say, when you and I started a business?
I mean, I would be very, very positive. I think every organization, it's important to bring young people into the organization. I talked to you about, Michael's strategy of 25%. I think that may even go up to 30% in the last couple of years, where you're bringing in that young people, where they bring a lot of innovation, different ways of thinking, analyzing things, that whole variety of experiences, of knowledge, of competencies, I think is really, really powerful. And any company and any organization absolutely should ensure that they're leveraging the full breadth of talent that's available in the marketplace. So I feel some of the entrepreneurs I've met, they're 22, 23, 24, 25. I really get such great energy from spending time with them and seeing, their passion for their product or service, how they've been knocked back by many things, but yet have the resilience and determination to go forward. So, I think that's fantastic to see, and I think we should continue to encourage young people to start up their own businesses and be entrepreneurs. But also, encourage leaders and companies to bring that talent into their companies as well.
Yeah, and it would be remiss of me not to ask you, obviously, about AI, because obviously AI now is becoming into a big play, and obviously as a technology expert in the background, how do you see AI impacting the old way of doing business and how we're going to be going forward?
Well, I think over the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's been different phases of new technology. And clearly AI is and will have a significant impact on work and roles. But we've been in a kind of a transition and change for many years now, and at least a couple of decades. And technology has been very much at the heart and the center of that. I think for any company now, they have to be looking at, I talked earlier about the operational day-to-day and the strategic element. And a lot of that strategic element is the transformational element, how technology is resetting business models, how it's changing fundamentally. companies' products and services and capabilities. The amount of data and information they're gathering is driving huge insights into both that aspect and how they might grow or develop and differentiate themselves to the competition. And certainly AI, and I think AI has definitely focused, I would say, more initially on the cost aspect and the productivity aspect and what aspects of what roles can be automated, or how AI can be used to assist roles like sales roles to make the sales individual more productive, more successful as well. But it also has a key role to play in new areas of growth and opportunities, as I mentioned, new features, new capabilities, new products as well too. So it's a very important aspect for companies. I think it's more challenging probably for small and medium companies. I think it's important from a government point of view. Enterprise Ireland, I know, have a huge amount of focus and emphasis around this as well too, to support Irish SME companies with not just AI, but the broader set of technology and capabilities to grow and be successful.
Brilliant. And I'd love to know, because obviously, as we talked about the mentoring, we talked about obviously the venture capital stuff that you're doing. If you were to give advice now to a younger version of yourself, let's say, coming out of university, of Limerick, in the environment that we are now, what would you tell that young man?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say you made a fantastic decision in going to UL. That was a good move to start with. I would say be true to yourself. Mm-hmm. Take a little more risks and opportunities. We talked about that earlier on, and balancing those elements. Certainly, as you grow in your career, for me, those lessons and areas that I learned around, don't build teams around that look like yourself. Build diverse teams, understand what your natural leadership styles are, and build an inclusive culture and environment in the teams and organizations that you work in as well too. But I think my key message would be, be true to yourself, take risks and try things, and have fun.
Mm. In terms of those kind of advice kind of ideas, as an author, I love books, and I know you're well read. I'd love to know, is there any book that really inspired you in the past that you would recommend for people to read that might help them in terms of their entrepreneur or leadership journey in any way or form?
I like reading autobiographies, mm-hmm. and there's a lot out there, and some of them are just people wanting to articulate how brilliant they are and how successful they've been and great decisions they made throughout their life, etc. I thought the most honest autobiography I ever read and most interesting one was Andre Agassi's Open. Mm. Really a fantastic book. He was so honest about growing up, his relationship with his father, his relationship with tennis, and his struggles and challenges throughout that career. And it was very open and very honest. So I think it's a fantastic book, and I would definitely recommend to read. But I love autobiographies. I read it's out a good few years now, Richard Attenborough's autobiography recently. That was really interesting as well too. So yeah, I'd recommend read Andre Agassi's book. Yeah. I'm not big into management books. I used to have a shelf of them there, and Martina got rid of all of them because I didn't read them, and I think you learn a lot from actually doing things, practical experience and learning and applying the learnings from your experiences. But I think some autobiographies can be great to get some insights from people speaking, especially if it's one like Andre Agassi's, where he's really open and really shares his failings and learnings as much as anything else.
Yeah, I think Frankie Sheen, who obviously was a Munster player and Irish player, had him over and speaking at the Pendulum Summit last time as well. So, and I think he was very well received, which was great. And I suppose interlinked to my last question, but a personal one outside of work, is there anything else outside of work or business advice you'd give your younger 18-year-old self, going right back to however many years ago that was?
So it's many years ago for sure. Look, I've been extremely lucky. I have really enjoyed my life to date. I hope with many years to come. I've had plenty of luck along the way, plenty of things I've learned from. I think it goes back to the points I made earlier on around, um, taking the opportunities, being true to yourself. I was great. I had two great parents who gave me a great set of values that I took forward in life. Obviously, I have a family with two boys and Martina, and certainly I learned for sure around the importance of getting that balance right in spending time with family. And I'm really pleased. I've got great relationships with my two sons and my wife and family, and I didn't lose any of that in what was a huge commitment to my career over the 35 years. And that's really important, especially as you move on to the next stage in career post kind of executive roles. I've set out a strategy now that I call a third, which is a third of my time is focused on some of the things you outlined earlier on, I suppose, around giving back to organizations, my knowledge, experience, advice, financial support in other areas. And a third is keeping my business brain busy with Lakeside Capital and VentureWave and a few other elements, because you can't be doing that all your life and then stop completely. And then the other third, which I guard very carefully, is family time, personal time, hobbies. I grow all my own vegetables. I love going out into the garden. I love traveling. We've traveled extensively as a family and great experiences around that. Myself and Martina travel a lot now as well. And that's really important. And looking after yourself as well, from an exercise and nutrition and mind and body is critical as well too. So yeah, but enjoy. If you're still 18, enjoy those early years. They're good fun too.
I love that. And I'm sure you've got many more years left, but I'd love to know, imagine fast forward to 1995.
Let me say that my gap to 95 is a lot shorter than Andrew Conway's, by the way. Go on.
Yeah, I know. But so let's fast forward to 90 or 95. And I put you on a stage in front of 10,000 people. I beam it out on my podcast, which is then out to 8 billion people. What message, if all of these interviews were taken away, all of the articles and everything written about you was taken away, what 3 messages would you like to leave with future leaders on the planet?
Look, I suppose when you're at that point, or even now as I kind of move from an executive career into what I described, you are kind of reflecting on what have you done? How have you helped people? How have you impacted people's lives? And I think it's really important that in those years now I'm in forward is giving back to people. And it's great to be involved in an organization like the Special Olympics, and to go down and see my local club in Killaloo, Ballina, and see the athletes and their training every Saturday morning down there, and see the impact that you can have on their lives, and allowing them to fulfill their lives, and organizations like that, but also the opportunity to mentor people, to guide people, to advise people from a career point of view. And the things I get most pleasure and enjoyment from is seeing people's careers grow and develop, who I interacted with or worked with over a number of years and time, and see how they're growing and developing. Because that ability to have positive impact, or to give back, or to give to people, you get it back 5-10 times more. In seeing their success and enjoyment. And so I think that's really important, and for me that's what's I look at as being important from a legacy point of view. And look, there's lots of people out there who are trying to go to college, who financially it's a struggle, etc. And how can you help them and support them in being able to get that education, get those opportunities. And I'm always open and willing to give people advice and support in their decisions and career and support. So yeah, I very much enjoy doing that now, more so.
And I want to say how grateful I am, because you really did support me. And because of you, I managed to get into Dell in terms of doing coaching. And because of you, I've become great friends with people like Pat Quigley and Barry McShane and Pat O'Sullivan and many others on kind of a high level there, who just lovely, lovely people. And as I said at the start, I'll say at the end, all of them absolutely sing your praises and say that you're an absolute delight to work with. And I have to say, having met you a couple of times now and spoken to you a few times now, I have to agree with them. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I thank you so much, Angus,
Thanks very much indeed, Doug.
for
It's
your
great
time.
chatting to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My name's Doug Gordon, and you've been listening to Aongus Hegarty on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories. I'll be back next week with another inspirational guest. In the meantime, if you need to get in touch, please contact me at doug@dougdgordon.com. From all of us here on the team of the show, I wish you a truly inspirational week, and look forward to seeing you next time.